Good to go. All right, welcome. When I came up with this idea, I pitched it to Lisa, and Lisa thought maybe 5 or 6 people would show up. And obviously there's more than that.
She wasn't wrong.
Huh?
She wasn't wrong.
So, a lot more than we expected. That's all right. If I stutter, if I trip over my words, just roll with it. So as far as our agenda, we're gonna do a couple stories here. We're gonna do one story in the French fort. We're gonna move up in front of the British fort. We're gonna go inside the British fort, and then we'll be done. As far as safety goes, obviously there's a lot of people, so if anyone has trouble walking, anything like that, there is a lot of walking involved. When we go into the forts, there's a lot of ruins all over the place, rocks sticking up, so just watch you don't trip. Try not to go on the ruins, walk on anything, because everything is very fragile. If something happens, if there's an emergency, like if I fall off this or something, no need to await further instruction. Go ahead and call somebody. Other than that, we're good to go. Okay. So, the first thing that we're going to talk about is not really a ghost, but rather a monster, okay? And because we just happen to have a lake that's known for having a monster in it, why not talk about it? So, everyone here knows Champ? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So, just a rundown if somebody doesn't know. Champ is a supposed lake monster living in Lake Champlain, okay? In 1609, when Samuel Champlain sailed down from Canada, he wrote about seeing a monster in his journals, 15 to 20 feet long with a lot of teeth. Although he was the first European to write about it, the idea of a creature living in the lake was nothing new. Both Iroquois and Algonquin Indians had a word for the creature living in the lake, Petoskok, meaning horned serpent, okay? Which I think is interesting because most modern depictions of Champ, he has horns coming out or some type of appendage on his head. The next famous account happened in 1819. Right over here, there is a ship in Balaga Bay. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Balaga Bay is known as the home of Champ. That's where the most Champ sightings have been recorded. The captain of the ship wrote about seeing a serpent that was 187 feet long, very specific, and once again having the head of a seahorse. So throughout the 1800s, minor sightings persisted. Newspapers wrote about it. Usually farmers, people who were living on the lake. In 1878, there was a very busy year. The first sighting was by Essex County Sheriff, who reported seeing a long serpent-like creature with silvery scales and onion-like eyes. The next sighting was, what was that? Oh, the New York Times published an article saying that railroad workers putting the railroad in, going up the lake, actually saw something, and they were so frightened they refused to go back to work. Later that year, showman P.T. Barnum actually offered an incentive for bringing in the hide of Champ that he could use in his World's Fair show. The largest group sighting was in 1901. About 40 people over on Balaga Bay Beach saw the monster beached on a sandbar about 100 yards offshore. They watched him for about 15 minutes, and all 40 of them told the newspapers that yes, what they saw was true, and none of the 40 reported seeing anything different. Nobody said they saw, a sturgeon, anything like that. They said this was some kind of creature. In 1945, in Ticonderoga Bay, a steamship hit something and almost capsized. The captain of the ship was questioned, and he said that he actually hit an animal swimming in the water. in the 1980s, there was a very large cluster of sightings. Many people on Boaga Bay Beach have their names on the sign in Port Henry as having seen Champ. Now, many scientists who've studied this have noticed that sightings go on a 40-year cycle. So in the late 1800s, then again in the early 1900s, then again in the 1940s, again in the 1980s. Their theory is that their theory is that there's some type of breeding cycle that would cause them to be more active during certain times. Now, if you do the math, we're getting very close to the time when more sightings should be coming around. In 2003, there were a string of sightings where that actually sparked enough interest. The Discovery Channel did a documentary on Champ, America's Loch Ness Monster. So, once again, we're very close to the time where you would see something. Okay? So, maybe we'll see something, maybe we won't. Then again, climate change could be causing some issues. Who knows? Don't know.
But keep your eyes open.
But keep your eyes open.
You never know.
You never know. All right. So, with that being said, if you direct your attention over the British Fort, okay, you see kind of a ravine and then a mountain. Anyone who's not from the area, very local, the mountain's known as Big Hollow. Okay. Now, once again, anyone who's local will know that Big Hollow has some really, really strange things that go on up there. So, as I've already spoken about the Native Americans, okay? So the Native Americans, contrary to popular belief, never lived in the Adirondacks, okay? They hunted and they buried their dead here. What's different is that the Native Americans believed that it was not a good thing to live around where you buried the dead, because the spirits lived on, restless, and maybe haunted those who are still living. Thank you. Archaeologists who studied native burial grounds actually noticed that for some reason, for hundreds of years, natives were always buried pretty unceremoniously, with nothing, just thrown in the ground and buried. So, oh, you got it? Sorry. Just thrown in the ground and buried. So, at some point, they started to notice that around the 18th century, that natives were buried with objects, okay? So these objects had certain significance, whether it be artwork or weapons or certain types of clothing, whatever. They had certain significance to them. In the late 18th century, when Europeans started to move in and trade with natives, they started to notice that more European objects were being buried with them, okay? Trinkets, guns, in some cases, money and coins. Now, from a local historian, it's been reported that there's actually a rumor that gold is buried on Big Hollow. While this may seem strange, the largest archaeological find for this site was over by the lighthouse, and it was a box of gold coins. So we know that gold coins were definitely used throughout the area, most likely for trade with the Native Americans. So it's very possible that the Native Americans could have been buried with these gold coins. As more settlers started to move into the area, strange things started to happen. So the first report was from a hiker in the early 1800s who was hiking Big Hollow. And basically, he reported that he had a vision where he was walking through the woods and all of a sudden the sky got totally black. And as he walked up ahead, there was a bonfire with smoke going everywhere, and there were Native Americans dancing around it. And as the closer he got to the fire, gold coins started to fall from the sky. Now, maybe they're trying to protect something, who knows? What's really strange is that this was not the only occurrence. In the 1840s, a woman was at the top of Big Hollow picking blueberries. When she got up there, she got off her horse. There was a blueberry patch. She was skimming through it. As she got done, she looked over and there was a patch that hadn't been touched yet. So she walked towards it, and as she walked towards it, she heard a bee's nest. So she was allergic. She had to get out of there. She grabbed her basket. She went up to her cart. As she got back onto her cart, a bee stung the horse, startled the horse, and it went over the cliff with her on it. In the 1870s, there was a string of murders within just a few years. There was a small town leading up to Big Hollow known as Cold Springs. The people who lived there at any time was no more than 100 people. Okay, let me backtrack. So the people living on Big Hollow, on Coot Hill as it's known, the first murder happened in the early 1870s when a man, a very prominent businessman, went to the general store in Port Henry, bought bullets, went home, loaded his gun, shot his wife, and then shot himself. Okay? The next occurrence was when another guy thought that his wife was cheating on him with a friend. He went to the friend's house and beat him to death with a farm tool. The causes for both the murders was insanity. So this is strange, but really the weirdest thing that I found was in 1909, and I have the newspaper article right here, I'll read it. So in 1909, there's a newspaper article that came out in the Elizabethtown Post that says, "Child boot found. Mariah mystery solved when berry pickers find body of laying child." While Reverend F. Sawyer of Panton, Vermont, who was visiting his father-in-law, B. Hartwell, was picking berries near Coot Hill, Mariah, he came upon the skeleton of a child. Upon investigation, it proved to be the child of Henry Lane, which disappeared last fall and was supposed to have been kidnapped. Coroner Marshall was notified, but as yet, particulars have not been heard. The circumstance surrounding the child's disappearance were especially sad. The father, only a short time previously, had been arrested on suspicion of having been implicated in the burning of a barn while drunk. In his frenzy of sorrow and fright at the unfortunate condition in which he was placed, by what afterwards was proved to be an unjust arrest, he attempted suicide by cutting his throat while in jail at Port Henry. At the same time of the child straying from the home, he was still in confinement. The mother went to a neighbor's house for a few moments, leaving the little girl, who was about 2.5 years old, at play in the house. Upon the mother's return, the child was gone, and although the friends, neighbors, and authorities made what was thought a most thorough search, covering as they believed every inch of ground for miles, no trace was found. It was generally thought the child had been stolen, and not a few supposed leads were followed up. The body was found less than a mile from the house, where the child must have wandered and perished from hunger and exposure. Pitiful as it is a welcome refutation for many rumors that have been current as to the child's probable fate. So, the child was gone. The police, the authorities, neighbors, friends helped look for it. They scanned the entire area for 5 miles and found nothing. And then she's found only half a mile from the house. So that seems pretty strange to me. Don't know.
What was the cause of death?
The cause of death was hunger and exposure. Now, the thing is, this was dated August 5th, and it said a year prior. So, if the child got out a year prior during the summer, August 5th, hunger and exposure, hunger, maybe, but it would have been probably at least a few days, if not a week. And exposure, the weather probably wouldn't have gotten that bad in the middle of the summer. So I don't believe that she got out and was just died from hunger or exposure. I think
What's your theory?
my theory is that very strange things happen up there, and that something is making people do very strange things. That's my theory.
And with that, you're going to move over to the
Right.
entrance of Fort
So,
St. Frederick.
those are my stories for right here. If you guys turn around, you'll see the flagpole. That's where we're going to head.
Remember the little girl?